The condescending offer the ships appeared without fanfare on a Tuesday morning. No dramatic entrance through storm clouds, no ominous shadow falling across major cities. They simply materialized in Earth's orbit like someone had flipped a switch and decided the universe needed more metal floating around. Dr. Sarah Chen was drinking her third cup of coffee in the SETI laboratory when every screen in the facility started screaming alerts. "Sarah, you need to see this," called her colleague, Dr. Martinez, his voice tight with excitement and fear. "The radio telescopes are picking up structured signals, geometric patterns. This isn't natural." Sarah set down her mug and walked over to the main display. The data streaming across the screen made her heart skip. Perfect mathematical sequences, prime numbers, and then something that made her blood run cold. The signals were coming from inside Earth's atmosphere. "How many?" she asked quietly. 17 vessels, each one roughly 2 kilometers long. They're just ... sitting there, like they own the place. Within 6 hours, every military installation on Earth was buzzing with activity. The ships had made no hostile moves, sent no demands, but their presence alone was enough to send the world into controlled chaos. Sarah found herself on a transport to New York, hastily appointed as Earth's lead xenobiologist for what everyone hoped would be humanity's first diplomatic contact with alien life. The United Nations building had never seen such frantic activity. Delegates who usually spent weeks arguing about trade agreements were now making decisions in minutes. Secretary General Maria Santos looked like she had aged 5 years in 5 hours as she briefed the hastily assembled first contact team. "They've sent a communication request," Santos said, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "Simple mathematics, followed by images. They want to meet. Today. Here." General Marcus Torres, a man whose presence commanded attention even in a room full of world leaders, leaned forward. "Ma'am, with respect, we know nothing about their capabilities or intentions. This could be a trap." Sarah looked up from her tablet where she'd been analyzing the alien communication patterns. "General, they have 17 ships in our orbit. If they wanted to harm us, they wouldn't need a meeting to do it. The alien arrived at exactly 1400 hours, as promised. It didn't walk down a ramp or emerge from a gleaming shuttle. Instead, a column of light simply appeared in the assembly hall, and when it faded, something stood where empty air had been moments before. Ambassador Vexka, as it introduced itself, looked like someone had taken a praying mantis and taught it to wear robes. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 arms that moved with liquid grace and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. When it spoke, the words came not from its mouth, but seemed to form directly in the listeners' minds. "Greetings, primitive inhabitants of the third planet," Vexka began, and Sarah immediately bristled at the word choice. "I am Ambassador Vexka of the Xantharian Collective. We have traveled far to extend to your species the great honor of our protection." Santos stepped forward, maintaining diplomatic composure despite the insult. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador. We are honored by your visit and eager to learn more about your civilization." Vexka's head tilted in what might have been confusion. "You misunderstand your position, small creature. We are not here to exchange pleasantries. We are here to inform you of new realities. Your world lies in a dangerous region of space. Without our guidance and protection, your species will not survive the coming conflicts." General Torres stood up slowly, his jaw tight. "And what exactly would this protection cost us, Ambassador? Cost?" Vexka seemed amused by the concept. "You think in terms of trade, how quaint. This is not a negotiation. Your species will dismantle all weapons of war. You will submit to Xantherian oversight of your governments. You will cease your chaotic expansion into space until you have proven yourselves worthy of such privileges. In return, we shall ensure your survival. The room fell silent. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. The ambassador had just demanded humanity's complete surrender disguised as a generous offer. It was Captain Jake Morrison who broke the silence. The grizzled space pilot had been quiet through most of the meeting, but now he leaned back in his chair and did something that would be remembered in history books. He laughed. It started as a chuckle, then grew into full-bodied laughter that echoed through the assembly hall. Other heads turned, some in shock, others with growing grins. General Torres fought back a smile. Even Santos had to bite her lip to maintain composure. Something amuses you, creature. Vexka's mental voice carried clear irritation. Morrison wiped his eyes and stood up. Oh, this is rich. You show up here, acting like we should kiss your feet because you're offering to protect us. From what, exactly? We've been scanning space for decades and haven't seen anything out there that looks particularly threatening. Sarah found herself standing as well. Captain Morrison raises an excellent point, Ambassador. You claim our world is in danger, but you haven't specified from what. Earth has survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, and to world wars. We've split the atom, walked on our moon, and sent probes to the edge of our solar system. What exactly do you think we need protection from? Vexka's forearms gestured dismissively. Your primitive sensors cannot detect the true threats that move between the stars. There are forces at work that would consume your entire planet without a second thought. The Xantherian collective has defended thousands of worlds from such fates. Defended, General Torres stepped forward. Or conquered. Because from where I sit, Ambassador, your offer sounds less like protection and more like occupation. The alien's posture shifted, becoming more rigid. You do not understand the magnitude of the threats that exist beyond your tiny world. The collective has maintained peace across 17 sectors for over 1,000 of your years. We have the experience and technology to guide younger species toward survival. Dr. Chen had been analyzing the ambassador's speech patterns and body language throughout the exchange. Something didn't add up. Ambassador, you mentioned threats that would consume entire planets. Are you speaking metaphorically, or is there a specific danger you're referencing? For the first time since arriving, Vexka hesitated. The pause was brief, but everyone in the room noticed it. There are entities that view organic life as a resource to be harvested. They have consumed entire civilizations, leaving nothing behind but empty space. And you fought these entities successfully? Santos asked, her diplomatic instincts picking up on the alien's discomfort. Another pause. The collective has managed to avoid direct confrontation through strategic withdrawal and defensive positioning. Morrison leaned forward, his experienced eye reading the situation like a military briefing. You mean you've been running from them? The silence that followed was deafening. Vexka's forearms moved in what could only be described as agitated gestures. The collective prioritizes the preservation of life over meaningless heroics. Strategic retreat is often the wisest course of action. Sarah felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together in her mind. How many worlds have you actually saved, Ambassador? And I mean saved, not evacuated. The question is irrelevant. What matters is that we can offer your species a chance at survival. If you accept our guidance, General Torres crossed his arms. Let me get this straight. You're refugees, running from something you're afraid to fight, and you want us to give up our sovereignty so you can... What? Hide behind us. Use our world as a shield. Vexka's mental voice became sharper. Your species lacks the wisdom to understand the complexities of interstellar politics. You cannot comprehend the scope of the threats that exist beyond your small world. Try us, Sarah said firmly. We're a curious species, Ambassador. We like to understand things. What exactly are you running from? The alien ambassador looked around the room, seeming to notice for the first time that the humans weren't cowering or begging for protection. Instead, they were asking questions, challenging assumptions, and showing no signs of the fear or awe that the Xantharian collective had expected. Morrison stood up and walked closer to Vexka, his movements casual but confident. You know what I think, Ambassador? I think you came here expecting to find a bunch of scared primitives who would be grateful for any help. Instead, you found humans. We don't beg for protection. We earn our survival. Your arrogance will be your destruction, Vexka warned. The forces that hunt across the galaxy show no mercy to those who refuse wisdom. Hunt. Dr. Chen picked up on the word choice immediately. These entities you mentioned, they're actively pursuing the collective, aren't they? This isn't about general galactic dangers. Something specific is chasing you. The ambassador's composure finally cracked. The Devourers have been tracking collective fleets for 3 solar cycles. They consume everything in their path. Technology, biology, even the memories of civilizations. They leave nothing but empty space and silence. The room absorbed this information in stunned silence. Finally, Santos spoke. And you thought bringing them to our solar system was a good idea. The Earth's location at the edge of this galactic arm provides strategic advantages. The Devourers may not detect our presence here for many cycles. It would give us time to plan, to prepare. Morrison shook his head in disbelief. You're using us as bait. You want to hide here and hope these Devourers eat us first while you figure out your next move. General Torres stepped forward, his military training taking over. How long do we have before they arrive? Vexka's mental voice became quieter. Our estimates suggest they will detect our fleet's energy signatures within 2 of your solar rotations. Perhaps less. The weight of this revelation settled over the room. Earth had less than 2 years before facing an enemy that had the Xantharian collective, with their advanced technology and 1,000-year head start, running in terror. Sarah looked around the room at her fellow humans. She saw determination in General Torres' eyes, curiosity in Dr. Martinez's expression, and something that might have been excitement in Captain Morrison's grin. Ambassador, she said finally, I think you've made a fundamental error in your calculations. Explain. You assumed we'd need your protection, but humans don't hide from threats. We face them, we study them, we figure out how to beat them. She paused, letting her words sink in. And sometimes, Ambassador, the people you thought needed protection end up being the ones doing the protecting. Vexka's forearms moved in obvious agitation. Your species cannot comprehend the power of the Devourers. They have consumed civilizations 1,000,000 times more advanced than yours. Morrison walked to the large window overlooking the UN Plaza, where normal people were going about their daily lives, unaware that their world had just changed forever. Maybe those civilizations were more advanced, Ambassador, but I'd bet good money they weren't more stubborn. The real threat emerges 48 hours after first contact. The world had changed in ways that would have been impossible to imagine just days before. Emergency sessions of every major government were in continuous session. The stock market had initially crashed, then inexplicably stabilized as human nature asserted itself. If the world was ending, people reasoned they might as well keep working. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the newly established Xenological Crisis Center, a hastily converted conference facility that had become the nerve center for humanity's response to the Xantharian revelation. Banks of computers displayed everything from stellar cartography to theoretical physics equations as the world's greatest minds tried to understand an enemy they had never seen. The quantum signatures are unlike anything in our databases, Dr. Martinez reported, looking up from a screen filled with data transmitted by the increasingly cooperative Xantharian fleet. These devourers seem to exist partially outside normal space-time. That's how they can consume entire civilizations so efficiently. General Torres paced behind the analysts, his strategic mind working through scenarios. What's their standard approach? Do they negotiate, make demands, or just start eating? Ambassador Vexka, who had taken up permanent residence in the facility, responded with what the humans had learned was the Xantharian equivalent of a shudder. They do not communicate in any recognizable form. They arrive, they consume, they move on. The process typically takes less than one solar rotation. Captain Morrison looked up from a tactical display showing the solar system's defenses. They've got to have some kind of weakness. Nothing that eats civilizations for breakfast gets that powerful without making enemies. The collective has studied the devourers for over 200 cycles, Vexka replied. They appear to be artificial constructs, possibly created by a civilization that transcended physical existence eons ago. Their technology operates on principles we cannot comprehend. Sarah had been listening while analyzing biological samples the Xantharians had provided from previous devourer encounters. Ambassador, in all your studies, have you ever tried direct resistance? Fighting back instead of running? The alien's mental voice carried what humans had learned to recognize as embarrassment. The collective doctrine emphasizes preservation of life through strategic withdrawal. Direct confrontation would result in unnecessary casualties. Unnecessary casualties, General Torres repeated slowly. You mean you've never actually fought them? Several minor collective vessels attempted to engage devour scout units in the Keth system. They were ... within moments. Morrison slammed his hand on the table, making everyone jump. So you've been running for centuries based on a few failed skirmishes. What kind of military analysis is that? Dr. Chen set down her tablet and looked directly at Vexka. Ambassador, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. Have the Devourers ever encountered a species like humans? Specifically, a species that doesn't retreat when threatened? The pause that followed was telling. Most species, when confronted with overwhelming force, choose survival through compliance or withdrawal. It is the rational response. That's not what I asked, Sarah pressed. Have they ever fought humans or a species with similar characteristics? No, Vexka admitted. Your species appears to be unique in its willingness to engage in conflict against impossible odds. General Torres stopped pacing and faced the alien directly. That's because you're thinking about this all wrong, Ambassador. You see the as an unstoppable force, so you run. We see them as a problem that needs solving. Over the next 18 hours, something remarkable happened. The combined scientific and military resources of Earth, supplemented by Xantharian technological data, began producing results that surprised everyone, including the humans themselves. Dr. Martinez discovered that the Devourer's quantum manipulation abilities, while impressive, followed discoverable patterns. "They're not magic," he announced to a room full of exhausted researchers. "They're using advanced physics, but it's still physics. If we can understand the rules they're operating under, we can find ways to interfere with them." Meanwhile, Captain Morrison had been working with military analysts from 6 nations to develop something the Xantharians had never attempted: offensive strategies. "Their ships are massive, but they move in predictable patterns," he explained, pointing to holographic displays of Devourer fleet movements. "They're used to prey running away. They're not designed for targets that shoot back." The breakthrough came when Sarah made a connection that had eluded Xantharian scientists for centuries. "Look at this," she said, pulling up comparative analyses on the main display. Every civilization the Devourers have consumed was highly advanced, highly organized, and highly predictable. They followed logical decision trees. When threatened, they either fought conventionally or retreated systematically, and General Torres prompted, "Humans don't do either of those things consistently. We're chaotic. We make decisions based on emotion as much as logic. We fight dirty when we have to, and we never give up, even when giving up is the smart choice." Ambassador Vexka's forearms moved in agitation. Chaos and emotion are not tactical advantages against an enemy with overwhelming technological superiority. Morrison grinned, the expression making him look years younger. "Ambassador, with all due respect, you've been running from these things for so long that you've forgotten the first rule of warfare. The enemy gets a vote, but they've never faced an enemy like us." The next morning brought news that changed everything. Long-range sensors detected massive quantum distortions at the edge of the solar system. The Devourers had found them. Secretary General Santos convened an emergency session that included world leaders, military commanders, scientists, and the Xantharian ambassador. The room was tense but determined. "How long do we have?" she asked, without preamble. "Based on their previous consumption patterns, they will reach Earth's orbit in approximately 72 hours, Vexka replied, his mental voice heavy with resignation. "Then we'd better get to work," Sarah said, standing up and activating the main display. "I present to you Operation Last Stand, humanity's plan for the defense of Earth." The plan that unfolded on the screens was unlike anything the Xanth had ever conceived. Instead of massive fleet formations or defensive positions, the humans had designed a distributed, adaptive defense that relied on mobility, unpredictability, and what military analysts called aggressive creativity. "We're not going to fight them the way they expect," General Torres explained. "No large fleets, no static defenses. Instead, we're going to use modified civilian spacecraft, guerrilla tactics, and something they've never encountered before: human stubbornness." Captain Morrison took over the briefing. "Every major spacecraft manufacturer on Earth has been working round the clock to retrofit civilian vessels with weapon systems. Cargo haulers, passenger liners, even luxury yachts. The Devourers are expecting military targets. They're going to get swarmed by everything from modified cruise ships to weaponized space tugs." Dr. Martinez highlighted the scientific component. "We've developed quantum interference devices based on Xantharian technology but modified with human engineering principles. Instead of trying to match their power, we're going to disrupt their systems, make them work for every meter of space they take." Ambassador Vexka looked at the plans with what could only be described as horror. "This is madness. You cannot defeat the Devourers with civilian spacecraft and improvised weapons." Sarah smiled, and there was something in her expression that made the alien step backward. Ambassador, you're still thinking like someone who's been running for centuries. We're not trying to defeat them in the way you understand defeat. We're going to make consuming Earth so difficult, so costly, and so unpredictable that they'll have to reconsider whether we're worth the effort. And if that doesn't work, Vexka asked. General Torres answered without hesitation. Then we'll make sure they remember us. Every civilization they've consumed went quietly. Earth is going to leave scars. The final hours before the Devourer's arrival were filled with frantic preparation. Across the globe, ordinary people were doing extraordinary things. Retired fighter pilots came out of retirement to fly modified spacecraft. Engineers worked around the clock to install weapons on vehicles never designed for combat. Scientists shared decades of research in hours instead of years. But perhaps most remarkably, humanity began to do something the Xantharians had never seen before. They started volunteering for the most dangerous assignments. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Captain Morrison found himself in command of a fleet that defied every military doctrine ever written. His flagship was a converted luxury liner, bristling with improvised weapons. His escort vessels included everything from military corvettes to modified mining ships. It shouldn't have worked, but somehow it felt right. All units, this is Bulldog. Morrison announced over the communication system as the Devourer fleet approached Earth's outer defenses. Remember, we're not here to win a conventional battle. We're here to show these things what humans do when someone threatens our home. Dr. Chen, monitoring from the command center, watched as the first Devourer vessels entered sensor range. They were massive, geometrically perfect, and moved with the kind of precision that spoke of absolute confidence in their superiority. They're not even trying to avoid our detection, she reported. They're coming straight for Earth, like they own the place. Good, General Torres replied. That means they're not expecting resistance. Let's show them how wrong they are. As the alien fleet drew closer, something unexpected happened. The Xantharian vessels, which had been positioned in defensive formations around Earth, began to move. But instead of retreating as they had done for centuries, they were advancing alongside the human fleet. Ambassador Vext's mental voice came through the communication system, and for the first time since arriving at Earth, it carried something other than fear or condescension. Human command, this is Ambassador Vext. The Xantharian collective requests permission to fight alongside Earth's defenders. Morrison's voice came back immediately. Permission granted, Ambassador. Welcome to the fight. And with those words, the battle for Earth began. Not with the organized retreat that had characterized every previous encounter with the Devourers, but with something they had never faced before, a species that refused to run, refused to surrender, and had somehow convinced there would be protectors that sometimes the best defense is an aggressive offense. The Devourers were about to learn something that would echo across the galaxy. Humans don't just survive threats, they make threats wish they had stayed home.